Hello, hi, it's Kim Seviour. It's the 4th of June 2023. Today I am talking about Israel, and known as the land of milk and honey. So, first of all, I just want to start with the facts of Israel before I go into any of the Bible readings. So, the population of Israel is around 9.7 million, which is 73% are Jews and about 18% are Muslim. And in the whole world, there's 13 million Jews, which has stayed about stable, even when Hitler annihilated all the Jews. So a lot of the Jews in 1933 through the Second World War, we still came back to 13 million. So it hasn't really increased much and it hasn't decreased much. So the size of Israel, which is tiny, is 420 kilometres times by 115 kilometres. And that in proportion to us in the UK is 11 times smaller than us, which is quite amazing, isn't it? The language is Hebrew. Also, they speak other languages very well, of course, like Arabic, English, French. And Jerusalem is the capital, which has finally been made a capital. We know Donald Trump got involved in that when he was president of the United States. Now, you know how many wars and things have been in Israel. It's just been volatile and continues to be volatile. The history is 1917, the British Army were in Palestine, which in that time was called, in the Old Testament, was called Canaan. Do you know that? Canaan, the land of Canaan. And this is the West Bank. This is where they're always arguing because the Arabs are in control of Palestine. And of course, they're fighting against the Israelis, which is this continual conflict that goes on. In 1947, the British withdrew. We withdrew our army from Palestine. And that was just before the start of the Cold War. So we then left them to it. And what a mess that has been, isn't it? Yeah. So they're all fighting over not so much religion, but over land. This is the thing. Moving on, in 1948, Israel was made into an independent state. But soon after that, very soon after, 5 Arab nations invaded the West Bank. That's when the friction started for the Palestine area. Now, the produce of Israel, the land of milk and honey, remember, is olives and figs. There's a lot of olives and figs. And pomegranates. I mean, we think of Jesus under the fig tree, remember? When he stood under the fig tree and he cursed it, remember? And there was no figs on it, he cursed the fig tree. There's also wheat and barley. They do wine as well, I believe. The present Prime Minister, that says there's been 8 Prime Ministers, I looked this up actually, is Benjamin Netanyahu. As we know, he's been in and out of Prime Minister there, losing a year here and there. Hasn't been a continuous reign all the way through for him. A little bit more about the Jews before I go on to any Bible verses is the Suez Canal has been another conflict. That's in control not by the Israelis, and that's that narrow strip of land. I've been up the canal. On each side, I think they've got one side which is the Egyptian side and one side which is Israel. Is not controlled. Don't think that's controlled by either parties fully, so there's conflict there as well, getting things through the ships through the Suez Canal. Now, the 6-day war that we talk about was in 1967, and do you know what? That 6-day war was only 132 hours of fighting, and there was 20,000 Arabs that died, but only 800 Israelites. Now that reminds me of Egypt, when they came out of Egypt and all the Egyptians were drowned in the Red Sea, but the Israelites were saved. So that reminds me of that. I don't know what it reminds you of, but that's a massive loss on the Arab side compared to the Israeli side. God's chosen nation is Israel. You know, we know that's the Holy Land and his chosen nation. Jesus came to the Jews. He didn't come to be a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or Church of England. He came to the Jews. Israel's a very, very complicated country, very interesting. You can look a lot of this up for yourself. Do test what I'm saying today. Always test what I'm saying. Look it up for yourself, okay? So there's been 8 more wars since 1948, and I haven't gone into any facts of that. It's just continual conflicts, really. I mean, they've got Syria. A lot of the prophecies for Israel, biblical prophecies are around that area. They talk about Gog, Magog. It talks a lot about all the different places like Damascus and all different places, but they're all in that area. You know, we're Gentiles. We're not Jews, obviously. So most of the prophecies are about the lands that surround Israel and Israel itself. So the calendar is a lunar calendar, which the months consist of 29 or 30 days, and they have to make it up with, I didn't understand the fullness of this, but they make the calendar up to join the solar calendar, which we're on, following the sun, to keep in line with it, because it's 11 days shorter than our solar calendar, which is quite interesting. They do celebrate a lot of feasts. Rosh Hashanah is our new year, and that is in September. They start. We always think of the new year, January, 1st of January, forgetting other countries do things in a totally different way to us. They do lots of feasts. You can find that in Leviticus 23 or look at it online. Okay? Well, the other thing I thought was quite interesting was their burial. You know, we spend like a week, 2 weeks waiting for a funeral. They've done it the same day or the next day. They have to bury their people very quickly. Obviously, they are dominated by Judaism. So Judaism is their culture and their belief and their religion. And that is the Orthodox Jews. Okay? So everybody follows Judaism if they're a Jew, unless you're a Messianic Jew. Messianic comes from the word Messiah, which is Jesus Christ. He was the Messiah. People that have accepted Jesus as their Seviour are Messianic Jews. Otherwise, they're Orthodox Jews following the laws of Moses. Okay? If you become a Messianic Jew, you've lost your family. They all turn their backs on you. It's really quite a harsh decision to make. I think that's spiritual, because it says, I chose you. Jesus said, I chose you. You didn't choose me, to his disciples. So it's this who chose who, I feel. So that's as much as I put down for some of the information about Israel. Okay, I'm going to move on to some of the biblical prophecies. I'm going to need my glasses for this. I'm going to read some from the Old and New Testament. So moving on, because time's going against me. The name Israel came from Genesis 32, and it's verse 28. And remember the sequence of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. God renamed Jacob. He called him Israel. So it's in here, it's in verse 28, and it says, this is Genesis 32. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. So Israel actually means struggled with God, which is quite interesting. So he renamed Jacob. God likes renaming people, doesn't he? It's like Paul on the Saul who became Paul. So then we move on to Genesis 49. And Jacob had 12 sons, okay? And they became the 12 tribes of Israel. Israel being Jacob. So the country started from Jacob. The 12 tribes, I'm going to quickly read the names out to you. His wives, he had 2 wives, Jacob. One was Leah, who had most children, and there was Rachel, who couldn't produce children. She did in the end. She did have a couple of the boys. So Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Joseph and Benjamin are the 12 tribes of Israel's 12 sons. You know, we've seen the Andrew Lloyd Webber, you know, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. That was the start of the country of Israel. Okay. Interestingly enough, in Revelation 7, there's 12 tribes again, but this time Manasseh is in there, but no Dan is in there. So out of those 12, in the days when it says will be sealed with the on the forehead with the sign, there's one missing. It's been replaced by Manasseh, which I looked it up, had to look it up, and it's one of Joseph's sons. But another interesting fact that I didn't realise is Joseph didn't make it over to the Promised Land. He never made it to Israel. He died before he actually made it to the land of milk and honey, as God called it. So they wandered in the desert for 40 years, went across the Red Sea, and Joshua finally brought them home and allocated the land to all the people, Israel. So all the clans, these families, set themselves up in these different areas, as was allotted via the rivers and the mountains, and that's where they started from. Okay, now there's a lot of prophecies that I wanted to bring, a few of these, of what's going to happen now, because there's 4 million Jews, or actually there's 6 million Jews scattered around the world, and what's going to happen in the end, later times. There's a lot of prophecies, and I'm going to bring this to you, a few verses. There's loads of them everywhere, but I'm going to just bring a few. Ezekiel 37 is a well-known verse of the Valley of the Dry Bones. We read it a lot in some of the churches. And Ezekiel 37, I'm going to read this to you. What's God going to do? He's going to gather them back to Jerusalem. All these people that have wandered from their home over the years now want to come back to Jerusalem. They want to come back. So let's just have a look at this verse, one of the verses. It is in Ezekiel 37, verse 21. I'm just going to read it to you. It says here, I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or divided into two kingdoms. Now, it's going back a little bit. It says, I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone, and I will gather them all around and bring them back into their own land. That is one of the prophecies. I believe that is for the future. A lot of people believe that's for the future. There's another one, Zechariah 8, verse 7. There's loads of them. There's a lot more than I'm going to bring to you now. It says he's going to, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I will save my people from the countries of the east and the west, and I will bring them back to live in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be faithful and righteous to them as their God. And there's other ones as well you can look up, because my time is going to go. It's Jeremiah 30, Jeremiah 31, 6 to 8 says he'll gather them from the ends of the earth. So I really truly believe that God is going to bring all these people back to Jerusalem and to Israel. They want to come home, like when you've been away for a few years, you want to come home. I believe that's going to happen. Now, the other thing that we believe for Israel is this temple is going to be rebuilt, as I spoke about this in the Antichrist in the last days. This temple, which is at the moment got the Dome of the Rock, which is this gold-roofed building, which is this Muslim church, synagogue, not a synagogue, sorry. I've lost my head here. Muslim temple has built right in the middle of this area, which was the holy temple where Jesus was when he was alive. And we still have to see this temple being rebuilt for the Antichrist to set himself up in it yet, I believe. Just to finish, a little bit more I could go on, there's a lot more I could say, but that's just a few points I've picked up on within the time I have. Just to say that Jesus is the Messiah. He has come, and they didn't believe him. So only a few people believed in Jesus. I'm going to just read a bit from John 6. I just want to make sure I get this verse in, because God showed it to me. Jesus said, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. So they asked him, what miraculous sign will you do that you give us, that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our forefathers ate the manna in the desert. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus said, I tell you the truth, it is not Moses who has given you the true bread from heaven. It is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he, that's him, who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. It's Jesus who is the bread of heaven. They're following Moses. They still believe Moses is the one God spoke to. They don't want to accept Jesus unless they're messianic. They're still waiting for their Seviour to come. They don't believe it's Jesus. We know it's Jesus. We know we have to accept Christ as our Saviour and as our Messiah. Israel, a very interesting country, very volatile. So much about it you could look up and study. That's just a few points on Israel today, and you can look up loads more for yourself. Okay, so I hope that was interesting. It's Seviour. Until next time, bye.